Hello there, and welcome to Weather Snap. It's Friday, the 16th of June, and I'm Clare Nasir.
And I'm Alex Deakin. On the show today, we are talking a return to thunderstorms this weekend across the UK. The humidity will be building once more. Also, two words that have been used a lot this week: pollen, bomb. Now, I'm sure the ears of hay fever sufferers have just peaked. Something you've been suffering with, Claire?
I've been moaning about it all week, to be honest. I'm sure you're sick and tired of me just moaning about my eyes streaming, etc. However, coming back to the final item of the show, you've got a really good anecdote about bird baths, I believe.
I think I may have oversold it, but yeah, stay tuned for bird bath news.
Bird bath news, and also we've got a good chat with someone from the RSPB talking about impacts of this hot weather. But first of all, let's turn our attention to Biparjoy, and that is a very severe cyclonic Biparjoy, which has made landfall across Gujarat in the northeast of India. We've been talking about it for the last week or so, tracking its journey as it moved across the very warm waters of the Arabian Sea, and now it's made landfall. It's mostly, Alex, a rainfall event, a lot of rain associated with this.
Yeah, not a particularly strong storm in terms of its wind strength, equivalent to a Category 1 hurricane when it made landfall, weakening now as they always do when they make landfall. But yeah, generating a lot of rain and something called the brown ocean effect. I didn't know a lot about that, but our expert on tropical cyclones, Julian Hemming, he's been talking about it quite a bit this week, caused by the heavy rain.
Yes, caused by the heavy rain and the storm just sort of pushing across the land where it normally loses its fuel. The fuel is obviously high sea surface temperatures. But if this land is low lying and filled with moisture and very warm, it will continue to fuel the cyclone. So, yes, it's called the brown ocean effect. It doesn't happen very often. It's quite a rare phenomena. And in fact, the first time it was seen was back in 2007 across the shores of Texas, where a storm made landfall, a hurricane, and this actually happened. It reinvigorated just for a time as it tracked across the land. When you tend to see these cyclones and these hurricanes slowly sort of lose their intensity because they don't have that fuel, the moisture, and also the heat.
That's really interesting. So it's only 16 years old, this phenomenon, and that's pretty young for a meteorological phenomenon, isn't it?
Yeah, certainly is. And it was Tropical Storm Erin, apparently, in 2007, which made landfall across the Texas coastline and it intensified as it tracked towards Oklahoma. So lots of rainfall associated with that storm. And actually, this is exactly what's happening now. Talking about sea surface temperatures, Alex, it's actually entered the news this week because in the last 2 weeks, some parts of the North Atlantic, the tropical seas of the North Atlantic, have seen a hike in sea surface temperature of 4 degrees, which is,
Normally the sea's like got that lag, isn't it? So it's you expect the land to warm up 4 degrees or the air over the land, but seas take a long time to warm up. That is an incredible jump, isn't it?
and in fact, this is not something new. We've been seeing this. There's evidence of this, which actually stretches back to March 2023. We've obviously had some very warm air across the North Atlantic, and the weather's been fairly static as well. But there's evidence now to suggest that during the early part of March 2023, the North Atlantic temperature rose above previous records to a 1 degree warmer than previous records. And that means extends from 1981 to 2011. So it's a climate trend which is quite recent, quite current. It's not something which we're going back 150 years. So that's quite significant, a 1 degree warming of sea surface temperature. Now, normally the North Atlantic, as you say, warms up much later in the summer. There is a lag effect because of the huge volume of the water. The sun has to really penetrate down the sun's light to actually exchange that light into heat energy, which then is radiated out or convected out into the atmosphere. So this is quite unusual and also rather worrying.
Yeah, very worrying. Some of the impacts, obviously, the most obvious one with warmer sea surface temperatures, more likely to energize powerful storms, tropical cyclones, and across the Atlantic, obviously hurricanes. So, increased chance with those higher sea surface temperatures of bigger storms, more powerful storms emerging. Also around the UK with higher than average sea surface temperatures. That could have an impact on the UK, making it warmer both by day and by night as well. And of course, warmer air holds more moisture, so potentially there's an effect that it could bring some heavier rainfall during the summer months as well. So a couple of impacts from these high sea surface temperatures, but globally sea surface temperatures are above average as well, and that means generally just warmer conditions around the globe. In part, of course, due to El Nino, as we talked about last week, but of course, increased temperature and increased moisture, higher sea surface temperatures, increase in heavy downpours likely as well.
The other interesting suggestion in the words, is, the information the scientists have given us about the explanation of this, is the fact that yes, there could be some atmospheric sort of natural pattern which has contributed towards this, but also weaker winds have reduced the amount of Saharan dust traveling across the Atlantic. And Saharan dust does many things. It's incredible. You can find Saharan dust as far south as the Amazonia. It plays a really important role in ecosystems, including the oceans. But one thing it does do is it scatters the light, it reflects the sunlight so that the sun doesn't penetrate into the water and warm it up. But because that really hasn't happened this season, that's something else which has contributed to this hike in sea surface temperature.
Amazing, isn't it, the atmosphere and how everything's all interlinked, and those little things like that can have an impact, such a significant impact, even hundreds, if not thousands of miles away. Got to love meteorology, haven't you?
Gotta love it. But what I don't like is jellyfish. And I know that's not in the scientific report, but I'm really worried when they
Yeah.
get more jellyfish across the coastal waters. Well, for
Wow.
good reason.
Wow. The globe is warming up. There's El Nino. It's going to be the hottest year on record potentially, and all you're worried about is jellyfish on your holiday.
Well, pretty much, yeah. Earlier on in the show, I did moan about my hay fever. And
No, I'll give you some sympathy for that.
yeah,
That's fair enough. And our colleague Aidan McGivern, he messaged me today saying he can't remember having hay fever this bad. So it's been pretty bad.
do you know the last time I think it was this bad was just after the Beast from the East in 2018? Because we had that sort of really quite a sort of horrible winter, as we all remember, a good growing season. And then, spring hit, and my goodness, the sun came out. It was the sort of spring forgot about itself and summer took over very early on. And I remember the pollen being absolutely just annihilating my nostrils then as well. There is evidence that for a pollen to be very high during this season, it needs a good growing season. It needs good rain during the early part of the spring, late winter, and then the sun comes out, and the plants just celebrate the fact that there's sunlight, photosynthesis, and obviously pollination. And that's pretty much. I mean, March across England and Wales was the sixth wettest on record.
All contributes, isn't it? There's so many contributing factors to this. Bit like whether there's always a knock-on effect somewhere, and there's so many contributing factors to why grass pollen has been so high this week. You used the word annihilation a minute ago, and the media are calling it a pollen bomb, because they like to add the word bomb to anything weather related. But what is a pollen bomb? Is it actually a thing?
Well, I think it's just like an explosion of another word we shouldn't really be using, but an explosion of pollen, which actually just erupts into the atmosphere. It's intense and it really impacts more people than it should. Let's just bring in the thunderstorm element as well. There is scientific evidence, and there's been papers written in Australia actually about the fact the combination of high pollen and also thunderstorms can lead to more cases and more enhanced symptoms of hay fever, stroke, asthma. It's been called thunderstorm asthma before, but enhanced cases basically of hay fever. And there's two mechanisms which are at work here, again cited in the paper. The first one is the strikes of lightning, which actually just sort of split the pollen apart and allow these spores to again erupt into the lower atmosphere. And then the injection of moisture creates a similar mechanism as well. But we talk about the fact when you get rain, the pollen count does go down, but it doesn't happen with thunderstorms, really, does it?
Well, it can, it's both. It's not a double-edged sword. Like you said, the lightning can exacerbate it. That is quite a rare phenomenon. It's an area of ongoing research, and I think, Australia, it's happened a couple of times. Limited evidence as to how often it's happened in the UK. But yeah, rain is normally a good sign for hay fever sufferers because it just washes the pollen out of the atmosphere. As simple as that. One of the reasons, again, why it has been so very high recently is because it has been so dry. Some parts of the UK didn't record rain for 28, 29 days until we had the thunderstorms earlier this week. And not everywhere even then saw the thunderstorms this week. So, yeah, the dry weather has been an exacerbation. Temperatures are also a big player in this as well. Did you know it can be too warm for pollen? So when you get above about 28 Celsius, actually pollen levels tend to drop off again. But we've been in this sweet spot of low 20s, mid 20s for a long time. So that is, again, why grass pollen levels are very high at the moment, because temperature's just been in that sweet spot, that those perfect temperatures for grass pollen production. So yeah, a number of reasons behind
And
it.
like winds as well, I presume that
Mm.
is a factor.
Yeah. Again, you need a bit of a breeze because that kind of keeps it suspended. But strong winds will blow it away. If it's completely flat calm, then the pollen never gets up out the grass. It kind of just stays at the bottom. So yeah, a number of meteorological factors.
And imagine having 35,000 lightning strikes in one day with very high pollen. Well, that's exactly what happened the other day. We saw a huge amount of lightning, obviously associated with thunderstorms and heavy rain as well. But if you looked at the radar, it was unbelievable. In fact, on Sunday night, I was driving back from London to Manchester, and I took a photo. I did a screen grab of the radar because it looked like a bird. It was absolutely massive. It had a shape like a swift. And we're talking about birds later, so there is a segue here somewhere. But actually, it extended. The one of the wings touched London, and the other one was moving up towards Cheshire. So that's how massive this thunderstorm sort of area was. Now there was heavy downpours in that, and sort of lighter ones, but a lot of lightning as well.
Yeah, 35,000 strikes in a day. And the day before, on Sunday, we had 20,000 strikes as well. So 50,000 strikes over the course of those 2 days. Like you say, the radar was the area of rain from that thunderstorm was huge. It was an MCS, wasn't it? A mesoscale convective system, a big thunderstorm that kind of self feeds itself depending on how the winds vary with height and how much wind shear you've got. Talked a little bit about that on our deep dive forecast earlier. So there's another segue there. Go and watch that on YouTube if you want to learn a little bit more about wind direction, how and wind speed, how it varies with height, and how that has an impact on thunderstorms across the UK.
So let's talk about the thunderstorm risk for the next few days, because I know a lot of people don't like it. Some people feel that, yeah, oh, thank goodness, we've got a storm. The atmosphere feels a bit clearer and cleaner and not that sort of clagginess. But I know family members of mine are quite phobic when it comes to thunder and lightning, and that's understandable. So what's happening, Alex?
Well, it's another good week for the storm chasers, and not a good weekend for the people that don't like thunderstorms, because they're kind of coming back. So we had the build of heat and humidity last weekend, culminating in these thunderstorms. It's turned a little fresher through this week. Now, I haven't really noticed it down here in Devon, but other parts of the UK have been turning a little cooler because the air's been coming back in from the east. But we're going back this weekend. It's almost like a repeat performance. We're increasing the moisture. The air's coming in from the southwest, so we're increasing the humidity. And there will be more thunderstorms now, probably in completely different places this weekend. Greatest risk, even tomorrow, even into Saturday, will be in the west. So Wales, Northern Ireland, the western parts of England, and southwest Scotland could see some thunderstorms. Might be some across the southeast for a time, but much of the east likely to still be dry on Saturday. But then an increasing chance on Sunday across the UK of seeing further heavy thundery showers across all but the far north of Scotland are at risk. But I suspect parts of the Midlands and southwest may well not see many at all. But what we could see on Sunday especially is thunderstorms grown in France that come up and clip the southeast of England. So that's another area we need to watch. So yeah, increasing chance of thunderstorms through this weekend. Not everywhere we'll see them. It's a classic summer situation, but where we do see them, a lot of rain in a short space of time, lots of lightning and big hailstorms as well. And that is likely to continue into the early part of next week. But then, yeah, what happens later next week could have an impact on a big festival. You're going to Glastonbury this year, Claire? Yeah.
No, I'm
Big music
dodging
fans in you?
Glastonbury. I've been many a time, mostly through rain and then brilliant sunshine, which is as bad because there aren't very many trees across the sort of the
No.
main part of it. No shelter, basically. So you either fry or you just get flooded out. That seems to be the way, doesn't it, really?
Well, hopefully this year it won't be quite like either because it's not. It's going to be warm. It's going to be humid. So that's probably good news if you're going, but maybe not great for sleeping. But then I guess the whole point of Glastonbury is not to sleep. But so it is going to be warm and humid. That much we can say. There are likely to be showers early part of next week. But actually, as we go through next week, the shower risk diminishes again. So, although there is, if you're going to Glastonbury, be prepared for a shower, obviously. But I suspect most of the festival will be dry. That's how it's looking at the moment, dry and quite warm, and quite humid. So that's what it's looking like at the moment. Obviously, it's the main days of music, what, a week away, Friday, Saturday, Sunday. So keep up to date with the forecast before you head off. But people will be getting there from Wednesday onwards. So checking the forecast again. But that's how it's looking at this stage. And other festivals this weekend as well. Isle of Wight, again, if you're going there, be prepared for a thunderstorm, particularly so on Sunday, but you might get away with it. But yeah, festival season is upon us.
Warm rain, though. That's the best thing about it.
Warm rain.
You're not going to get trench foot, are you? I was at Glastonbury in I think it was 1997. And I think it was that year Hot House Flowers played. And the only moment the rain stopped was when they sang, I Can See Clearly Now the Rain Has Gone. And everyone cheered. And then the rain came back.
Beautiful. Beautiful.
Now, I'm going to be talking about birds in a minute because this is a really important subject because it's not only us who are suffering from pollen and high heat and muggy nights, very uncomfortable nights, but just spare a thought for, our little creatures outside, our wildlife who, there's not a lot of rain around and, it's not pleasant really, is it? Do you have a bird bath story or do you have a bird bath? Let's start at the beginning.
Yes, I do have a bird bath, and I topped it up the other day. Very important to keep them topped up.
How big is it then?
Bigger than a dinner plate, but smaller than a dustbin lid, I'd say. Is that useful? So
Yeah,
it's a bit bigger than a dinner plate. Yeah. And we get all sorts on it. Well, sparrows often as well, robins, blackbirds, bluebirds, that would be interesting. Blackbirds are in there, and it's the part of the garden where we get a green woodpecker.
Oh, that's magical.
Yeah.
Is that the story?
No, my story about again, I can't help but think this has been hyped up a little bit. Do you know how you get? So we bought this bird bath, and it's like pristine, kind of creamy. I guess it's probably made up. Is it made out of limestone? I don't know what it's made. I'm not good at that kind of thing. But it's kind of pristine cream colored, and it kind of was too bright for the guy. Kind of a bit shocking, a bit too. So we wanted to make it look weathered. And a top tip for making it look weathered, not leathered, was to cover it in yogurt. So I was told, I can't remember who told me now, it might have been my dad, put some yogurt, and probably my mum actually, put yogurt on it. And that helps to grow the lichen and helps to get, it greens it up and it makes it look pretty rapidly more natural because the lichen and the stuff eat the yogurt. There you go. That's my bird bath story.
Did it work?
Yeah, it did. Yeah. It looks very weathered now, and the birds love it. So
That's
clearly,
brilliant. So you top up your bird bath all the time, and that's really important. During this extended hot spell, we are now thinking about birds and other wildlife because it is so dry outside, and lack of water can mean life or death for some little creatures. So how best do we help nature? Here is John Carter of the RSPB.
Ordinarily, birds access water through various means, ponds and ditches and even kind of drains and things like that. But when there's nothing around, it's really quite critical that they're able to find water. Dry weather also means that the ground is quite dry, so it's actually quite difficult for them to find food as well. So things like blackbirds and robins that normally dig around in your garden for worms and things, and they get a lot of moisture from that as well, they're really struggling to find food. So, the water is really critical in one part. What I also do in my garden, I actually water areas of soil to kind of soften it, to kind of give them access to food that they might not get otherwise. One of the main key things as well is to keep the water clean. In this weather, it kind of stagnates pretty quickly, and a lot of birds are using it, and it just reduces the chances of transmission of any kind of diseases or anything like that. It's not only about drinking, it's also about bathing, so keeping their feathers in really good condition as well. On our nature reserves, in the bigger picture of it, we have to monitor water levels and check that things are good there. And providing shade as well is really quite important, because even when it's hot, birds like to be able to kind of go away and kind of find somewhere nice and quiet and shaded, and where the temperature is slightly lower. So even in your garden as well, by having kind of bushes and leaving your grass a little bit longer and things like that can really help as well. One of the things we're noticing here in the UK in particular is as climate changes, we're seeing the effect of that. So we're seeing birds and other things like butterflies and dragonflies that are kind of moving into what was formerly uninhabited areas for them. So birds are moving up, they're colonising from southern Europe. So as the Mediterranean gets drier, and we're seeing severe droughts in southern Spain and places like that, these big wetland areas that traditionally held large numbers of breeding birds down there are no longer wet. I mean, the birds are having to move north in order to be able to try and find somewhere that they can colonize so they can continue to breed. Now, this is, it's interesting for us to see all these wonderful exotic birds appearing on our shores, but it actually signals something quite critical and quite worrying long term. So what the RSPB and other conservation organizations are busy doing is trying to kind of mitigate against this by creating new wetlands and expanding wetlands and making them more available for this incoming birds. I mean, the long-term worry is that the birds that have evolved to live in northern habitats and northern climates, they've got nowhere to go. We can't create new habitat because the Arctic is the top, and as that's drying out, that's going to create big problems for us moving forward. So there's a lot for us to think about as we enjoy this lovely weather, what the implications of that might actually be on our wildlife. The best thing we can do in our own gardens, if we're fortunate to have a garden, that is to put out clean water. Make sure you change that regularly. Make sure you don't overfeed as well. Food can go off pretty quickly in the summertime, the warmer temperatures. So just put a little bit out regularly to make sure that there's food available. And it is critical that we kind of still feed through this time of year, particularly with it being dry and invertebrates being kind of harder to find for some birds. One of the great things about putting things out in your garden for birds is that it's entertainment. It's free entertainment, isn't it? I mean, it's great for our well-being to connect with nature, and in the place where we live. I mean, to get things coming in and using your space, there's a really great thing about that. It's not only the enjoyment that we get from watching them, but there's also kind of a calming thing. It's really good. There's been lots of research to suggest that engaging with nature, whether it's on a nature reserve or in your own garden, is really, really good for for your well-being, your mental well-being. And what's better than seeing all these little creatures coming in and having fun because you've provided something for them? That's great.
John Carter of the RSPB. And if you'd like some more information on helping nature during this hot spell, take a look at the RSPB web pages, rspb.org.uk. Now, let's head over to Ollie Claydon, who has last week's highs and lows.
Here are your weather extremes for the week beginning Monday the 5th of June. The highest temperature was reached on Saturday the 10th of June at Chertsey, Surrey, with a high of 32.2 Celsius. The coldest place was a Boyne in Aberdeenshire, with a low of minus 0.2 degrees during the early hours of Thursday the 8th of June. After a dry week, thunderstorms during the weekend produced some heavy localised downpours. The wettest place was Church Lawford in Warwickshire on Sunday with 34 millimetres of rain. And it was a very sunny week across much of the country, away from some eastern counties. Tyree in the Inner Hebrides picked up the most sunshine in one day, with 16.3 hours on Friday the 9th of June.
Thanks very much, Ollie.
Right, is that it for today, I think, Claire? That's been another long one, hasn't it? Another long and intense one. Thank you very much.
It's really good to talk to you. It's been a really busy week, actually. And whatever you're doing this weekend, wherever you are, stay hydrated, slap on some sun cream. Obviously, if you suffer from hay fever, I think a bit of Vaseline just around the nostrils is quite good. And just have a great weekend.
And keep up to date with the forecast, because there could be some warnings around those thunderstorms. So make sure you're across that and get the app, because then you can track the storms yourself.
Have a great weekend. Thanks for listening, and we'll see you next week.
Another great weather snap, Claire. Thank you so much for listening. And don't forget to hit subscribe. Then you catch all of our daily weathers on YouTube as well.
And if podcasts are your thing, check out our Met Office podcast channel. Lots of information, lots of stories there. And we'll see you again next week.